what's the rest of the year going to be like? What are we going to see?
It depends on who's going to war next.
I know.
You just never know.
I think exactly what you just listed is exactly what the rest of the year looks like.
All thoughts and opinions shared in this recording belong to the participants. This podcast is meant to inform and educate and should not be seen as solicitation or endorsement for business. In this episode, the advisors discuss some of our firm's investment processes. These are just a few of the many possible approaches to investing. Individual results may vary depending on your goals, risk tolerance, market conditions, and other personal factors. Please consult a qualified financial professional before implementing any investment strategy.
Welcome to the Market Moment. My name is John Martfeld, and I'm joined with my good friend Isaac Johnson over here to my right, and my almost great friend Eli Freeman over here to my left.
I'll take it.
So welcome, guys. It was a good 4th of July weekend we just went through, and half the year is gone, and it's kind of been a whirlwind, fast, lots of things happening.
That's right, and today's your birthday.
Oh, yeah, today's my birthday. Well, when you get over 50, nobody really cares, especially the person having the birthday. So I appreciate the happy birthdays, but it's really just a day of somber and one more day closer to the end, and I'm past halftime, and, it's like, anyway, it's tough. It's not as fun as
not
when you're in your
John.
20s.
I really enjoyed that.
So morbid on a birthday. All right, today we're going to talk about mid-year, kind of like the mid-year stuff. Like, what are we looking to do to what's our checkups of our portfolios, our financial plans, that type of stuff. We're also going to talk about the BBB, the big, beautiful bill. It passed. It got through. It was signed like Trump had predicted on July 4th. I believe he signed it. There's some really beautiful things in it. There's some, some things that aren't so. I mean, it's a massive bill with lots of stuff in it. We cannot get into the details on this podcast. It'd take us all day, and and I'm not quite sure. I haven't even read through the whole thing. I know there were certain things taken out, so on. But anyway, that passed, so that's a pretty big deal. The markets hit all-time highs last week, so on and so forth. So anyway, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. Any topics, any things you want to talk about?
I was going to say, when it comes to the big, beautiful bill, we're working on a video, or Eli's working on a video that'll come out on this channel later this week.
Yeah, so we'll record it. I'm not going to detail everything in the big, beautiful bill, but probably the things that are most impactful to people who are working as well as soon to be retired or retired. Basically, anyone that would be a client, the things that impact the largest impact to our clients. I'm going to do a video. It'll come out via email. So you'll have an email. It'll have a script as well as a script of the things that are changing as well as a video topic. The video shouldn't be longer than maybe 10, 15 minutes. Hopefully not longer than 15 minutes. But I'm going to try and make it as detailed as we can so that we can accomplish good detailed information that's actually helpful.
I think the video should be as long as the Democrat who had the floor before the House vote. I think he set a record for the longest speech before a bill.
He did.
So I think that should be the length of our little deal that you do.
I'll work on it.
Okay.
There may be some singing in there then.
Perfect. All right, so let's kind of switch gears. I know that the BBB is on a lot of people's minds. The one thing, the biggest takeaway I can take from it, which is kind of a relief, we knew it was going to happen at some point, whether one way or another, but the taxes are extended. The 2017 tax cuts are extended, and for our world and for our clients, that's a very important piece of the whole deal. And I think that's great, and we kind of figured that would get done. I'm glad that was part of it. And that's kind of the biggest thing I can take away from it on that side.
Yeah, if the tax cuts weren't extended, if you were in the 12% bracket, you'd be in the 15. If you're in the 22, you'd be in the 25 or maybe even the 28%. So that you would have seen an increase in your tax bill if the tax cuts had not been extended.
And the corporate piece of it would have been pretty dramatic.
The corporate was huge.
Yeah, and that I think is a big deal that we don't talk enough about. That corporate would have gone back up to being one of the worst in the world.
35%.
Exactly. So I'm glad that
up
for
from
that
21.
Part, yeah, I'm glad that part did not happen. All right, let's talk about mid-year reviews. Right, this is kind of fun. Summertime, we're not thinking that much necessarily. We're thinking about going out and enjoying the lake or golfing or fishing or whatever we're doing. But what are the things that we need to be looking at, guys, when you're thinking about financial planning, when you think about where we're at in our own plans?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great time to look at your portfolio for a lot of different reasons. I mean, the first one, we kind of done a little brainstorm before this, was just like tax opportunities. Whether it's, I don't know where you would capture loss, but if there's a position to kind of do some tax loss harvesting, it's a great time to look at that, do some rebalancing. Or if there was a major event, like you got a raise, you got a bonus, something like that, and you need to increase your withholdings. Maybe set some aside. I mean, I used to work in the world of real estate. You don't get withheld taxes on a 1099. So you kind of got to plan for that on the front end, maybe taking a look at your books and seeing what that's looking like. If you're doing quarterly payments, I mean, there's a lot that can change just in the 6 months than what you prepared for in January.
So the idea being, we're through 2 quarters. Let's check in, make sure that, especially on something like tax estimates, if you're paying in tax estimates, make sure that you're up to speed on your tax estimates. Work with your CPA if there's something that you have questions over. In the state of Arkansas, the tax estimates, because we had a natural disaster here in the last year, tax estimates aren't due until later part of the year.
November, I believe.
Yes,
yeah,
around November. So if you are behind on your tax estimates, you're not going to owe a penalty. Just get it up to speed before I'd have to look it up. I apologize for not looking it up beforehand. But get your tax estimates in. The tax loss harvesting, that's a very interesting thing to do consistently. So if you own just index funds, you probably aren't able to capture tax loss harvesting. And that's why a lot of times, if you'll see in after-tax portfolios, we might use something like a direct indexing or individual stocks for the purpose of capturing those intra-year or intra-month tax loss harvesting. If you look at your portfolio and you have something that's down or it's lost money, one, it's probably a good time just to look at it and say, okay, why is this down? And is it time to rotate out of it to capture that tax loss? And if you capture a tax loss, you're able to use that in 2 ways moving forward. The first is you can offset your income by up to $3,000. So you make $100,000, you get a standard deduction, which just got increased, which we'll detail in the video. But you get your standard deduction, then you can write off about $3,000 of income. If you don't use all of your tax loss for that $3,000, then you can offset a gain forevermore. It doesn't go away until you pass away. So if you have a tax loss on your tax return, that carries over until you capture a gain. So you sell a property, you sell a stock. It's a really useful tool to have some of those tax loss harvests in your back pocket in the event that you want to make a lifestyle change or a change in the future.
Yeah, the tax loss harvesting, Eli's done a great job of kind of showing me how to do that on the way we do it here, which is fantastic. But I think one of the biggest keys, like in the area here, we're in Walmart country, Tyson, JB Hunt. There's a lot of folks that have high cost-based stocks where they paid for them in 1975. $1,000 is worth $2 million today or whatever. And if you sell it, you owe a lot of taxes on that because your cost basis was $1,000. It's a massive difference. Well, tax harvesting, tax loss, if you do that properly throughout the year, you can actually start to take some of those massive gains that you have and counter them with loss. And you can do that for a long period of time and eventually actually get in a really good position where you're not all your assets aren't in all your eggs in one basket, if you will. So the tax harvesting is not, it's great to do just in general terms, but if you have a large position and you have a large capital gain issue, the only way, technically is to pass that down to your kids, right, at a stepped up basis. But there are different ways. There's ways to unwind that, and the proper planning. The tax overlay stuff really works on that. So anyway,
it's great.
Shout out on that. I also think this is the time of year. I always, as I do reviews for clients, one of the things we talk about, we kind of reiterate your risk tolerance, and I show a chart of April of this year to clients. The market went down. Dramatic. We talked about that last week. It was down 15%, had the fastest recovery in history, right, of a 15% down market, which is crazy. So, but during that time, there's a lot of panic that was starting to take hold in some people, especially if you didn't like the tariffs or what's going on, or, if you don't like Trump, whatever. It's a very scary time. And the idea that we're back above those levels, that we fell down to is besides the point. It doesn't always happen that way, right? I think it's a great time to reevaluate your level of handling the market ups and downs. And it's not just about what your risk tolerance is in comparison to what you need through the life of your life to make it work, but what can you actually handle? And if that was bothersome, if that hurts you, because we've talked about it on this podcast, we've had 16 years of really good market with some little blurps in there. But if there's a pullback, can you handle it? And so I think it's a good time to reevaluate when we're at all-time highs. I always think it's a great time to reevaluate your risk tolerance at all-time highs, because if you make decisions, make changes, you're making it at the best. You're selling high, if you will, if you're rebalancing or restructuring how if you couldn't handle that 15% downturn, but it's been great market for so long, maybe you need to readjust or rethink your risk tolerance.
Yeah, I actually had a meeting yesterday that had we redid his risk score earlier this year, and he was one of the ones who calls every time there's a little downturn. He'll call, what's going on. So we met and kind of worked through why he felt that way, and he didn't call me for like 6 months, and he came in yesterday. And he was like, do you think I made the right decision taking some risk off? And I said, absolutely. He goes, really? Like, I've missed out on this great market. And I said, yeah, but you didn't call me. And I didn't mean it bad. But,
right.
But he started laughing. He was like, yeah, he was more comfortable.
Right.
He was able to sleep at night knowing that he didn't have to worry about the big volatility because he's not ready for that, or he doesn't like that. And he can make it without it. So
you're talking, especially in this instance, you're talking about a big portfolio allocation potential change. So because we're at a place in the market now where we've seen some volatility, if you think, I can't take that volatility, potentially there's a big change. I really like that. I also like small changes. And in a market like what we've just experienced, something like a portfolio rebalance could be something to consider.
Might be perfect timing for that.
One thing, most retail investors don't do this, but if you're working with a financial advisor, you're working with someone who's managing a portfolio for you, most of the time, whenever you sit down, you do some form of risk scoring or risk metrics as to how much risk you want to take with the portfolio, you come to an agreement.
Yeah.
And that agreement may be, hey, we want to take 50% of portfolio and go into stocks, 50% into something that's other than stocks that's lower risk. Well, anytime that the market does well, like what we've seen over these last 16 years, what will happen is your stocks should outperform the lower risk investments. Now, that won't happen every time, but sometimes the stocks will. And when that happens, you don't just want to sit on it, because if you've targeted a 50-50 allocation, you may be 70% stocks, 30% lower risk. Yeah. So mid-year could be a really good time to look at doing what is called a portfolio rebalance. Yes. Taking money from stocks, moving it into one of your lower risk assets, or the flip side, if you have too much in lower risk. I also like to reemphasize, portfolio rebalance could also mean emergency fund rebalance.
Yeah, right.
Having enough cash so that you can withstand a big life change that's unexpected. So emergency funds for different people, different amounts. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything you're saying. It's one of the things that when you go through a period like this, of this long of a kind of a bull run, it's really, again, had little blips, but been going on for so long. We get used to that this is just what the market does. It's, at this pace, if the next 16 years were the same as the last 16 years, we'd be at 100,000 on the Dow. I know we don't like to talk about that. We'd be really high on the S&P. It'd be way up there. So, you're like, it's not really probably be sustainable like the next 16 years. Like, it's just been a magical 16-year run. And I think we were in 401ks, and a lot of people out there do not look or pay attention to the markets like we do, or we have to. And so you just get used to it. We just put your money in there and it makes money, right? Yeah. And I think that if you know your risk score, what you're willing, and we do some pretty good questions that kind of open your eyes on, like, what if the market goes down? I think one of our questions is, if the market goes down 33% over a 3-month period, what would you do? Yeah. And most people look at that and say, well, that'll never happen. What are you talking about? And we're like, no, it can happen. And that's, I think, where you need to make sure you're evaluating. But also, if you're going to retire at 65, we do a retirement plan. You're going to be fine, and a lot of times your risk score that you might give and what you need might be off, and you need to know what that is as well, right? You might be aggressive, but you might only have to be moderate. It's nice to know those things, and I think those are great opportunities when the market's at all-time highs. It's not fun to talk about that and reevaluate that when markets take a massive dip.
Yep.
Right. And I think it's great at this time to reevaluate all that.
If you want to refill a cash bucket, refill an income bucket, get prepared for the rest of the year. now's a fairly good time to do it. Middle of the year, markets are in a good position right now. That kind of leads into, if you look over the next couple of months and you know that there's some upcoming big expenses, you're going to purchase a car, have some home renovations that are coming on, even if you need to prep for Christmas.
Yeah.
It now might be a good time to start the preparation on your cash side to increase some cash so that you can go ahead and do those things without having to worry about big market swings.
Yeah, I mean, my 2 sons and my wife, they've had to really prepare because my birthday's today. And they've had to put money aside, for massive gifts that I'm sure I'm going to get later.
Sure.
So I'm just, I'm patiently waiting. We'll see what I get. But, I mean, I'm sure it's a big deal because they've surely been planning properly for this. Surely. All right. Hey, we'll go talk about a couple other things. But one thing I wanted to say before we go any further, last week there was a massive flood event in Texas. And it's getting worse and worse by the day. I think there's 80 plus people that have passed away, which is just hard to even understand. And it's a church camp, and there were young ladies that got swept away. And it's our heart goes out to the families and prayers for Texas and all that. I just want to make sure I didn't forget to say that. That was a pretty big event last week, and it's horrible for those folks. So anyway, wanted to say that. All right, back to happier things. So we've got the rest of the year to go. What are our expectations? What do you guys think is what's the future of the rest of the year? We've had this great run in the market. We've hit all-time highs. Think about what we've been through. We talked about this we've had the election change, which is a 180. We had tariffs that scared everybody to death. We've had massive, infighting in Congress trying to get bills passed, this big, beautiful bill passed. We've had, not to mention, Ukraine and Russia are still at it. You've got Israel and Iran that are in a ceasefire right now, right? But those moments when that stuff happened is pretty massive events, right?
Yeah.
What's the rest of the year going to be like? What are we going to see?
It depends on who's going to war next.
I know.
You just never know.
I think exactly what you just listed is exactly what the rest of the year looks like. So you if you were to ask someone, what does 2025 look like? They would have been dead wrong in January. And if you say, okay, what's the next 6 months look like? Well, we can't. The last 6 months, we weren't even close on predictions.
No,
the
even
next
the
6
Fed.
months, we have no idea.
Yeah.
But there is something that we could control, and that's
I'm about to do a hard pivot. That's an incredible pivot.
Tell me.
is it in the middle of the year checkups that if you had planned to do retirement contributions.
Oh, you're still on this.
I'm
sorry.
Let's make sure that your retirement contributions are taken care of. So,
yes,
I don't actually want to completely change, but one thing that I did want to before we shift off of it is if you're doing retirement contributions, you plan to do 401k contributions, Roth IRA contributions, backdoor Roth, mega backdoor Roth, and/or funding a brokerage account. Now's a good time to look at which accounts have you funded, which have you not funded, so that you know by the end of the year or by April, some of them have different dates, which accounts do you need to or can you fund in this short period. So, for example, I perform backdoor Roth. Well, I know I've done my wife's backdoor Roth, but I haven't done my backdoor Roth for the year. So over the next 6 months or 12 months, I know that I need to be doing a backdoor Roth.
And 90% of people don't know what that means. And so explain that just real quick, what you're talking about.
Yeah. Backdoor Roth is an opportunity for someone to contribute to a Roth without doing the traditional form of contribution. So the reason that you might do it is if you can't contribute to a Roth because of income amounts, then you can perform a backdoor Roth. So that's if you have no IRAs and you have high income, then a backdoor Roth may make sense for you.
Yeah, it's not a 401k, does not. It's just IRAs, individual retirement accounts.
So if you have no pre-tax IRAs, then you can perform a backdoor Roth. Now, the steps that it takes to get there, you have to contribute to a traditional IRA, not take the tax deduction on your tax return, and then convert the money from a traditional IRA to a Roth IRA. You can do that no matter what your income amounts are if you have no IRAs.
Yeah.
So that's what a backdoor Roth. Mega backdoor Roth's a little more complicated.
Yeah.
I might do a data brief on a mega backdoor Roth, but there's another way that you could get up to really $60,000-$70,000 into a Roth in any given year,
which is awesome.
Utilizing a mega backdoor Roth.
Most people, and the reason why I say that, most people believe if their income goes over, and the tax laws are changing every year, right? They go up, but if you're making over a certain amount of income as a single or as a married, you hit a point and you cannot contribute to a Roth, and then you can do the backdoor Roth, but there are parameters there. Now, one thing I always say, though, in a 401k, I've had a lot of people come in and have this mistake that they think they cannot do the 401k Roth because their income is too high, but that is not correct. They can do the Roth contributions in a 401k no matter what their income is, and you can do that up to 20 whatever the limit, 21,000 limit,
23,500 if you're
now,
under
and
50, 30,500 or
31,000
if you're over 50.
If you're over 50,
then if
which
you're
is
59
awesome.
to 62, it's like 34,000.
There's a lot of little
so
intricacies.
complicated.
Crazy.
And that's totally separate again from IRAs. So you can do all of that plus a $7,000 backdoor Roth or
contribution,
traditional
depending on your
contribution.
income.
Yeah,
Exactly, which is pretty cool.
very cool.
Okay, all right. Now we got anything else on like the mid-year planning?
Isaac, do you have anything else?
Yes, real quickly. Just start kind of preparing for open enrollment at the end of the year, knowing maybe there's some big events coming up next year. Like one that me and my wife, we have a 17-month-old at home now. So we knew going into 2023, we were having a baby. And I was like, okay, we need to get some lower deductible health insurance because we have some big expenses coming up this year. Sitting down either by yourself with your significant other, making sure you're having those conversations about, what's this next year look like, and what those big expenses are. Again, kind of talking about Q3 and Q4 planning for big expenses. That's one that probably gets overlooked. You just say, well, I'll take the insurance I had last year, whatever. Don't worry about it.
Right.
You can really save yourself a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And going down that path, if you're currently on a high deductible health plan, you can or you're eligible to contribute to a health savings account. So if you don't know what a health savings account is, I highly recommend that you research it. In my opinion, it's the best financial account that you can own. You get a tax deduction on the contribution, it grows tax-free, and it comes out tax-free. So it's the only way that you can legally completely skip tax. So if you're on a high deductible plan, don't miss out on the opportunity to contribute to an HSA, and it's a great tool to use.
Yeah, I think you're right. Most people do not take advantage of it.
Nope.
And they should. Okay, there's a lot of great stuff we've talked about here today. Okay, back to the end, we're at the end here. Is there any parting thoughts? What's the Fed going to do? Any predictions?
Can I check the odds real quick? Hang on. I keep an eye on the odds of a rate cut in July. It was
Isaac's over here sports betting
look,
on the Fed.
I got a huge future on the cut in July.
He has a parlay on whether Jerome talks about it before he cuts or after he cuts.
No, after the meeting in June, there was actually the odds had a 20% chance of a cut in July, and that's all the way down to 5% now. So it's not looking great.
So you know what? Do you have the data back to January 1st? What the odds were of a rate cut by July?
No.
I bet you it was pretty high.
It was up there. Mm-hmm.
And so this is the thing about the Fed. The Fed is in 2022 when they raised rates 500 basis points basically. At the beginning of the year they said they weren't going to raise rates.
Yeah.
So you just can't know until the meetings and and we waste too much time on it and think too much about it. But I do think we're going to have some rate cuts before the end of the year. And I know the housing market and the interest rate, just in general, interest rates are pretty high right now.
Yes.
So it'd be nice to get some of that going. But I know there's a tough battle ahead on different viewpoints on that and what you're supposed to do.
Inflation's still low and unemployment's still low.
Yeah.
So there's not much reason necessarily to cut drastically.
Right.
But
From the parameters they've put out.
From the parameters they put out. Yeah. Yeah. So in fact, like we said many times, they never got to that 2% rate, so they technically should be raising rates if they go back to the original conversation. So yeah, it's just we've got a wild 6 months ahead of us. We've had a wild 6 months for so far this year. Everybody's made it through, hopefully unscathed on the market side of it at least. It's been a fun time. We hope the next 6 months are as fun. So anyway, have a great week. We'll see y'all next week, and peace out.
Sounds great.
Thanks, Jeff.
The hosts of the Market Moment podcast are employees of Mach 1 Financial Group, LLC. Mach 1 is a registered investment advisor located in Rogers, Arkansas. A copy of Mach 1's current written disclosure brochure is available through the SEC website and available at disclosures.mach1fg.com.